Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
Welcome everybody to Back to the Father here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. This is a show that we do once a week, 1 o'clock every Friday afternoon. It is broadcast across all of the Guadalupe Radio Network's social media platforms like, okay, I got to turn my computer down. My apologies. Rookie mistake. There we go. All right, welcome. This is Back to the Father. It is focused on the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa Theologia. We come on every Friday, 1 o'clock Central Time, and talk about particular topics. And the show has kind of evolved and changed a little bit through the years. It used to be a little goofier, and we used to wear hats. And
can always bring that back. I'm ready anytime.
Always bring it back. If there's a demand for the hat. I actually like this. I like this angle better.
Oh, good.
I like this. It looks much better. And so last week, I would say we had a program which is exactly what I'm kind of hoping for, and that's where there's a lot of interaction. I'll throw out a topic, and I'll kind of take the lead as far as what we're going to talk about. But then beyond that, just have at it and contribute. We had Timoteo last week communicating with a philosophy friend of his who I think is overseas. I actually asked Timoteo, you don't know this, Sissel, to ask his philosopher friend if she would come on the show with me today to talk about the topic of these rationalist philosophers like Spinoza and Leibniz. She wasn't able to do it, but that's okay. So if you're watching, we'd love to know where you are, who you are, and what you think about these particular topics as we go through it. The tagline, as you see on the thumbnail, is putting the fun in Thomistic philosophy. That's what we try to do. I mean, I think Thomistic philosophy is a blast. When I picked up the Summa Theologia about 15 years ago at a Catholic bookstore and started reading it, it fundamentally changed my life. And I love to think like St. Thomas Aquinas. In fact, I am going to be giving a presentation to a Legatus group here in Dallas a week from Thursday, and that's the title of the talk, How to Think Like St. Thomas Aquinas. And maybe next week, in preparation for that talk, that'll be the topic of Back to the Father. But today I want to talk about a couple of things. You may have seen that the tagline for the program, the email tag and subject line was, what makes the human person unique? And I'm of the opinion that as we move forward, probably the most challenging thing that it's going to be in our culture is defining the human person, because there are robots, there's AI, there's a lot of efforts to replicate the human person. And I have no doubt, even in my lifetime, that we are going to be encountering robots and AI, generated whatevers to such a level of sophistication that it may be hard to even tell the difference between them and us. But I'm also of the opinion that nobody can ever create a human person other than God and us cooperating with God. I don't think you can ever create a human soul. And so the challenge is going to be, what is unique about the human person? What is unreplicable? What can they never create in a lab? What can somebody, I don't know if Elon Musk is doing this, but there's people there. It's like this, they're the people that are hell-bent on creating human beings and as like human beings as possible. And so I think the better we understand what a human being is, all the better. I was talking to a friend of mine, a very bright philosopher by the name of Roy, and he was telling me that the very idea of a person comes from the Christian notion of the Blessed Trinity. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I trust him. But he said that the very name person comes from Trinitarian theology, the three persons of the Blessed Trinity, which we are made in the image and likeness of. All right, so it's interesting. So the very personhood that we have is based on our likeness to God and the three persons of the Trinity. I don't know if you knew that or well. You know what? I jumped right into the show. I didn't even introduce Sissel Anderson. She's our producer. She's the sounding board. She's the student. She's the one that likes to wear hats, although she doesn't do it any longer.
I have a chicken hat in the other room. Just say the word, guys. Say the word, and I'll bring the hats back.
Say the word. If enough people say on the chat that they want Sissel to put on her chicken hat, personally, I think it would take away a little bit of my credibility as the host of the program, because if I'm sitting here talking about the human person and what makes us unique. Also, in the second half of the program, and I say half because there's no real determined length of this program, I'd like to go about 30 minutes and then open it up for comments. Although, if you comment ahead of time, we'll go ahead and jump in. I see there's always like somebody new. Who's John? Do you see John's comment?
I think he's new. I think he's new.
Yeah, what did he have to say? Okay, nothing. Okay. All right. So we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on X, we're on Rumble, TikTok, Instagram, all those platforms. Sissel's keeping an eye on the comments. If you want to comment, you're very, very welcome to do that. And so let me ask you this question. I mentioned that this show, Back to the Father, is dedicated to the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas is the patron saint of all Catholic school education. I speak often about an encyclical written in 1879 called Aeterni Patris, the Restoration of Christian Philosophy, according to the mind of St. Thomas Aquinas, written by Pope Leo XIII. Have you ever wondered what's so special about Aquinas? What's unique about him that makes him the patron saint of all Catholic education? Why not Augustine? Why not, John Henry Newman? Why not Pope St. John Paul II, although he's a little bit recent, What is it about Aquinas? Well, I've got 6 things that I'm going to point out about Aquinas that I think makes him the ideal candidate to be the patron saint of all Catholic school education. Sissel, do you want to take a stab at all this? You're nodding your head.
I'm nodding along. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, yes. So keep talking, Dave.
So wait, you said how many reasons for why you think he should be, like, what you think would mean that he should be the patron of schools?
Imagine if, the Universal Catholic Church came out and said, Sissel Anderson is the patron saint of all Catholic school education. I mean, that would be like, whoa. I mean, because Catholic school education is extremely important.
Yeah, extremely.
And so you better choose correctly. Not to say that you wouldn't be a good choice, but it's already taken.
Right.
Aquinas already got it, so
yeah.
You were just born
a little too late. Born too late. There's like the song by the Ponytails, "Born Too Late," man.
Yeah, but that's okay. So why Aquinas? Why not Augustine? Why not Damascene or Jerome or Augustine? What was it about Aquinas that brought about this distinction for him being the patron saint of all Catholic school education? So if you guess one of them, I'll leave you alone, okay? So you want to take a stab at it? I feel like we ought to have like that Family Feud board, top 6 answers on the board.
We should have a Family Feud board. That'd be so much fun.
You got to be able to get one of them. I mean, and this isn't official. This is just my opinion.
Sure. So Dave's Family Feud board.
Yeah, right. They're just like Family Feud. They just survey 100 people.
Is it too on the nose, too obvious to be like, well, he wrote something called like the Sum of Our Faith? Like the Sum of the Faith? Like, isn't that just highlighting how much detail and how much research and study he did and writing he did to help us better understand our faith? Which is something that I think is a model for all students. I don't know. Is that like too broad, too obvious?
I don't think so.
Okay, perfect.
I think you've pretty much hit on maybe a couple of them. And one of them I said is that he offers a comprehensive explanation of the human person and the Catholic faith, right? So I think that's what we're getting at. When you write a book called the Summa Theologia, you are summarizing the Catholic faith. But what's interesting, and I think I may have mentioned this last time, Sissel, is that in reading the history of philosophy, and I read in the 13th century and even the 14th century, there were a bunch of people that wrote books called Summa Theologia.
Yeah, I know we've talked about that before.
It's a very general
title,
name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the summary of theology. And so it's almost like you're just taking a stab at it. This is what I think theology is all about, so I'm going to summarize it. So he wasn't the only one that wrote a book by that name, but his is the one that became the most famous. I mean, I've also mentioned that the guy before him who had the most comprehensive summary of the Christian faith was a guy named Peter Lombard, and his was called the sentences, the sentences of Peter Lombard, and that was the gold standard. And so there's no reason to believe that somebody else may come along at some other point and write a summary of theology that becomes the gold standard. But I will say the very fact that Aquinas has lasted for 750 years. I mean, he died in 1274. This is almost 800 years ago, 750 or so. So it's definitely had the test of time. So that's one of them. The comprehensive explanation of the human person in the Christian faith. He also was the test of time. Equally that's one of them. A philosopher and a theologian. He also philosophy is what we can know through the light of human reason. And then theology are those things that transcend what we can surpass human reason, those things that we have to be told directly by God because they are either refused or they are made known to us, and we can only really respond to them by faith. Right? So I think he was equally a philosopher and a theologian, and also he was a great synthesizer. He lived in the 13th century, and it was a time when everything was kind of coming together. There was the writings of Plato that had become available, the writings of Aristotle. You had Muslim and Jewish philosophers, and also great Christian theologians and philosophers that had weighed in on all this stuff, like Boethius and Augustine and Ambrose and Jerome and Damascene and the Eastern fathers as well, Gregory of Nyssa. So all these men had given their input on this in a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different faiths, even pagans like the ones I mentioned, and some of the Stoic philosophers and the Epicureans. And so the beauty of Aquinas is that he took all this and he synthesized it. He put it together in really one book, the Summa Theologia. And he also had the Summa Contra Gentiles and a lot of commentary on Aristotle and commentary on Scripture. And so that's another one. He was a great synthesizer. I also think he lived at the right time. Somebody like Augustine maybe lived a little bit too early because he didn't have the advantage. Augustine really didn't even have access to Plato. He had more access to the Neoplatonists. I don't even know if Augustine ever read Plato, although he was a Platonist, but there was these Neoplatonists that were very popular in the centuries right before Augustine. And so I think Augustine just lived a little too early. He didn't have the breadth of history that Aquinas had in order to kind of synthesize everything together. So that's one of the things that I think is also important. And he's also a man of incredible holiness. And he was equally a mystic as he was an intellectual. Most people think of Aquinas as being a highly intellectual character, and he certainly was. But he also was a mystic. He was known to levitate. He had a very, very strong devotion to prayer and adoration, and of course, Mass, being a Catholic priest himself. And so those are the reasons. All right, so let's go into the first of the two topics today. And I'm curious, the first one is, what is the human person? Kind of taking an inventory. And I think this should be taught in every single Catholic school to like third graders. I don't know if it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. But what exactly is the human person? What are our faculties, and how is it related to our final end and also to the world that surrounds us? And I see a couple of other people. Timoteo has joined us. So great to see Timoteo. Any comments that we need to mention, Sissel?
I do not think so. I think Timoteo was playing up the Family Feud game that we were playing earlier and saying the survey says, which I think I won that, but that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, okay, I can go with that. All right, so the first thing we need to know about the human person is that we are embodied souls. Okay, we are soul and body. We are matter and form. We have spiritual souls that are together with a body. Okay, one single substance, and it's body and soul together to make up who we are. right? And so the soul is what gives life to the body. And that's why when you have a body without a soul, it becomes a corpse. It's really no longer even a body. And when you have a body that's been separated from the soul, then you have a separated soul, which is still longing for the body, right? So you have this composite, you have this substance, and it's in the world. And St. Thomas Aquinas would say that everything in the world that is created is good. So really you have the substance of a human person in relationship to this good world and all these good things that are out there, and having a good body and a good soul and surrounded by goodness, all with the purpose of leading that person back to its ultimate happiness, which is God. And that's the title of this show, is Back to the Father. That's what the whole point is. And so you should understand that the human soul has a vegetative element to it. The vegetative soul has to do with nutrition, growth, and reproduction. So the vegetative soul is responsible for keeping our body alive in the nutrition, having our body grow to its flourishing size of adulthood, and then continue to stay in existence. And also the vegetative soul also helps us with reproduction, because since we're going to die, without reproduction, we're not going to be able to continue to propagate the human race, right? So reproduction, growth, and digestion. And then you have what's called the sensitive aspect of the soul. Now, this is kind of interesting because there are exterior senses that everybody knows about, and these are the 5 senses of sight and smell and taste and touch and hearing, right? Everybody knows about those. And these are the ways that with our soul, we have contact with the exterior world. How are we going to kind of interface with all these good things that are out there, right? And then, did you know that there are interior senses of the soul? I don't know if you knew this. There are interior senses, and there's 4 of them. Okay, and I'm just going to pause for a second. I want to see. I'm going to kind of put you guys on the test. Not Sissel necessarily, but just everybody who's out there. Can you name anything that St. Thomas Aquinas refers to as an interior sense of the soul? And by the way, everything that we've talked about so far, we share with the animals. There hasn't been anything yet that I've mentioned, the vegetative soul, the sensitive soul, the interior senses. All these we share with our dog and our cat and our pet goldfish, okay? So, have you ever heard of interior senses? Or is anybody guessing?
I want to say we've talked about this vaguely in the past. I don't remember if you've necessarily called it that, but I feel the pressure to say something to help.
Especially since you were bragging about winning the last one with the Family Feud thing.
That was
right?
an easier one, to be fair. But I guess I'll just go with. Okay, no.
You're gonna appreciate this.
So is this? When you say these, you said you said all the things we've talked about previously. Those are all ones that we share with animals. Are these ones we share with animals?
Yes,
we do. Okay.
Yeah.
Like memories.
Yeah.
Memories?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yes. That's one of the 4. That's one of the 4.
There's 4.
You thought you thought you were done, didn't you?
I thought I was halfway.
So memories, and then those would be stored sense images. Okay. So let's pause here for a second, and you see this glass, right? And now I've taken it away, right? And you don't see the glass, but you still have a memory of it. I don't know. I trust it was a good memory of seeing this glass, right?
It was a wonderful memory.
And so you can call that memory back, and the calling of the memory back is one of the other interior senses.
Oh, is recall, or is it something?
It's got a different name. It's called imagination.
Oh,
okay. So
obviously,
can you imagine that glass that you saw a moment ago?
Yes.
Okay. So can your dog imagine the glass? Like, you think about it. There's no way for us to really know this because nobody can talk to a dog and get the straight skinny out of it. But when you, let's say you come and pet your dog, and then the dog wags its tail and it's all happy because it's whatever. You have a dog.
I do.
So Sissel's dog is all happy, and then Sissel leaves and goes into the next room. Well, can that dog kind of have a memory of Sissel and even in imagination, not necessarily picture her, but is there something imaginative where the next time you come in the room, he's not like, now who's this?
Now, who's this person walking in here again?
Yeah, who's this person that for the last 5 years, every single day she comes in, I wag my tail and I recognize her.
She gives me food, all things.
So there's, clearly.
Yeah, you hear about even like dogs after a long period of time of not seeing their owners, especially ones that were very, like when like guys have gone off to war and come back to their dogs, and their dogs are so excited because they're like, oh my goodness, it's my person is back again. So definitely.
You saw that Richard Gere movie, what was it called? Like Hachi or something?
I don't know if I've seen that one, actually.
It's a movie. This guy is like a college professor. And he would go to the train station every day and take the train, and then he'd come back, and the dog would be waiting for him.
Yeah.
And Richard. And so one day he goes to his class and he has a heart attack and he dies, right? So clearly he's not coming back. Well, that dog waited for him.
I know.
For like years.
Oh.
And if you go to that Japanese town, there's a statue of that dog there. Because that dog waited for him to come back, and of course he never did. But people were so touched by it. So, well, this is all to say that in Thomas Aquinas's teaching, the memory and the imagination would also be in the brute animals, the irrational animals as well. And then there's something, and this is kind of cool. There's something called common sense. Now
I don't have that.
But it's not what we call common sense.
Okay.
Common sense, we think of it as you have like you make good decisions.
Don't walk in front of a car.
Common sense or don't run in the house with scissors in your hand, or run between cars, or that. But that's not what he means by it. By common sense, what he means is, let's say you put a pizza in front of me, and I smell the pizza, and I see the pizza, and I taste the pizza. The common sense brings all the senses together for like one particular. Because if I say pizza to you and you have an image in your mind, it's going to involve in your mind how it tastes, how it looks, how it smells. And so rather than all these different senses hitting you at the same, it's like Thomas says, well, there's a part of you that can kind of synthesize it all together. Like if I say, your sister Tova, right? You can your common sense can bring the time that you've hugged her, that you may know what she smells like, what she sounds like, all these different things come together, and the senses unite to create a single thing. Okay, so that's what he means.
Okay,
that's what he means
cool.
by common sense.
I would not have figured that one out, in case anyone's wondering.
I don't know if they're wondering or not.
But now they know.
And then the final interior sense is called estimative, and that's kind of like a fight or flight. It's the way Thomas describes it is if like a wolf is going towards a pack of sheep and the sheep all run away. It was a part of them. It's almost like an instinct that animals have, and we have it to a certain degree as well, where you're not necessarily reasoning it like, oh, there's a wolf over there, and I think I better get out of here. But instead, it just is I saw in Aquinas 101, they call it animal reason. Animals don't have reason, but it's kind of that instinctive reason that an animal would have. Okay, so that is an explanation of all the senses, the 5 exterior, the 4 interior, and then having to do with the sensitive appetite, and we've talked about this a number of times, so I'm not going to belabor it, but you have the concupiscible appetites, which are love and hate, desire, aversion, joy, and sorrow. Okay, and then you have what's called the irascible appetites, and it's despair and hope and despair, fear and daring, and anger. Okay, so again, still those are all in the animals. Okay, so everything I've talked about so far, the irrational animals. But then what we have and what makes us stand apart and be unique is that we are able to rise above all that through intellect and will. And these are the things that we have with the angels, that we have with God, but that we don't share with the animals below. Okay, the intellect and the will. And the important thing about the intellect is that whereas when an animal sees this glass, like I'm holding right here, they see a particular glass. They see this one, and they can see the features of it with their exterior senses, and then they can have the imagination and, the common sense and all that of the interior senses. But what they can't do, and what we're able to do, is we are able to abstract a universal glassness out of this object, okay?
Oh, glassness is back.
Yes. What was it, turkeyness?
We used
to
the
talk
tape's
about?
old version was turkeyness, which was just a silly thing to say, I think.
And I've talked a lot about nominalism and William of Ockham and what he did to really kind of start the downward slide in philosophy is that he denied universals. And so if you think about it, and the reason I've spent so much time on this is that the thing that differentiates us from the brute creatures, from the irrational creatures, is our ability through our intellect to abstract, which means that when you see a frog or you see a flower or you see a blade of grass, you can abstract a universal quality out of that, which means that you also are abstracting a nature, which means that you are able to understand it beyond what just your physical, eyes and your what can be known through the common sense of your exterior and interior senses. And that's what distinguishes us from the animals, is to be able to universalize things. And when nominalism chops that off and says, no, there are no universals, there are no natures, there's just individual things that we tag a name onto. All right, that's the problem, and that's why there was such a problem in the 13th century in the age of scholasticism, in this debate about universals. And I would say that nowadays the universal debate is still going on, but it's only going on in like college campuses among like egghead philosophers in the philosophy department. It's not something that I think in general where anybody's talking about. But I would argue it's extremely important. I think it should be taught in every high school in America, is the problem of universals and abstraction. And this is where, again, the reason why St. Thomas Aquinas is the patron saint of all Catholic school education. Leo XIII says it needs to be taught in every high school, in every college, in every seminary. I don't think we're doing that, at least not to the extent that Leo XIII would have liked for us to have done. All right, and then finally, the will. The will is an intellectual appetite, whereas the sensitive appetite is drawn to that, chocolate eclair or the meat lover pizza slice. That's a sensitive appetite. The intellectual appetite is able to take that universal that the intellect abstracted and then desire it. Okay, so you can desire justice. You can desire, getting graduating from college or getting that degree that you've always wanted, or desire getting married. That's not a sensitive appetite. That's an appetite of the higher part of your soul, which is the will, the intellectual appetite. And that, again, is something that the animals are not able to do. They're not able to rise above the individuals, the particulars, the sensitive appetite, and all those other things that I talked about before. So, all right, I have talked an awful lot, and maybe...
You've also made everyone hungry, Dave. All the food analogies, I think, is starting to... Timoteo's hungry, and so am I.
Oh, yeah,
so.
I talked about dessert, I talked about pizza.
Yep.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, the high school class that I teach is always right during the lunch hour. Yeah, well, it's 1:30 to 2:45, and I'll show these pictures of banana splits and chips and salsa and hamburgers and all that, and I always get the same thing. It's like, man, come on, quit doing that, all right? But anybody's free to run off and get lunch if you want to. Okay, just bring your phone with you and continue to correspond. All right. Any other
Keith
other
is
comment?
happy that you didn't mention bacon, because that was at least one less thing.
Yeah.
But now we have mentioned bacon,
yeah.
so it's kind
so
of...
if we don't mention bacon, did we just mention bacon? Okay. Can you not see that? That's actually kind of a philosophical question.
You mean like if a tree
like
fell?
if you're saying I'm not going to mention bacon.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing about the tree falling in the forest and all that.
I prefer if what is it? Is that if a man talks in a forest, is he still wrong or something like that? If his wife can't hear him or something like that? Yeah, there's some witty version of that I enjoy.
Yeah, pretty funny. So that's kind of a snapshot. I will say, because in preparation for this program, I watched one of the Aquinas 101 videos about the powers of the human soul, Father Gregory Pine. And he has like a 6.5 minute summary of this that's really, really good. And it's very straightforward. And I think it's very important. If I was still teaching high school, I would show that video to the kids and explain this, because like I said at the beginning, I think the one thing we really need to do is understand the human person, what makes us unique, what makes us distinct. And once you do that and interiorize that, no AI, no robot, none of this nonsense that's going on right now where they're trying to replicate humanity is ever going to work, because you have to have God involved in creating a human person, because we cannot create a soul. All right, so that is that, and thanks for contributing. And I don't know if there's anybody on Facebook.
I've been monitoring. Let me double check again and make sure. There's people watching, but no one's commented over there. I've also been monitoring I've tried today. I'm really trying hard, Dave. Be proud of me to watch all of our sites, including X and TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, TikTok, I see our 25th anniversary logo there. It's how cool. But they're asking me to log in, and I don't have a login account for TikTok.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I've got it. I'm monitoring.
So I can watch it, but I can't log in. So anyways, I know that's a lot. And then at any given moment, so you can be drawn into the conversation. And so you've really got to use...
I'm using every part of my brain that God has given me as much as possible.
every brain cell that you own is...
Which is not many to start with,
now.
and then...
All right, so we can always go back to that, and I think it's all related. When you talk about philosophy and theology and St. Thomas Aquinas, you're always going to return to the human person, because that's really what it's all about, and our relationship to God and our relationship getting back to Him. But I do want to switch gears pretty significantly and talk about the third of the great rationalist philosophers of the 17th century. And by the three, the rationalists and the empiricists came in threes. It's interesting, I mentioned this last week, is that you often get these triads, these trinities of people, which I find fascinating. And the three rational philosophers started with René Descartes. I think therefore I am, the cogito as it's called. And then you had Baruch Spinoza, who we spent a lot of time talking about last week on this show, and had some great feedback on that. He's the one that believed he was a pantheist. He believed that the entire world is one substance, and that God and nature are the same thing, which would mean that we are part of this one substance, which means we are God, and God is us, and it's just very, very pantheistic. It's kind of weird, but it is, as I mentioned last week, even Albert Einstein said, if there's a God, I want it to be Spinoza's God. And so he is not insignificant in the history of philosophy, and certainly, certainly is. But one of his contemporaries, and the person I want to talk about today, is probably one of the most brilliant people that's ever lived. I don't know if his philosophy... I don't agree with his philosophy necessarily, but I want to tell you about Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
What is it with philosophers and their names? Like, there's not. I know there are some, but there's just not that many that are like
Adam Smith. How about him?
Okay. Like I said, there's a few of them, but I feel like the ones that we talk about the most have the wildest names. Like, that's a prerequisite.
Yeah, I mean, William of Ockham. That's not too weird. I mean,
I don't know. Ockham is I don't know. They just have a name that just you're like, yes, that's a philosopher.
Yeah, right. They just a philosopher name. Like when they were born, their parents said, like, "I'm going to give you." So, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. I want to tell you about him, and I want to, first of all, just kind of throw it out there for the folks who are listening right now. And Sissel, you, of course, are the sounding board, so you got to answer this question yourself. And everybody be honest, have you ever heard of this guy? Has the name Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz ever crossed your mental radar? Be absolutely
honest.
Okay. Yes.
When I was looking, because I was reading your show notes, Dave, earlier, and I was looking at it, and I did look at it, and I'm like, that name, and it's one of those things where you're just not sure if you've heard the name before, because it just sounds very like, okay, that name, I feel, but I could tell you nothing. I feel like I've heard the name, could tell you nothing. Probably before today could not have told you he was a philosopher.
Yeah.
But I may have heard the name.
Okay, so did you take calculus when you were in high school?
Pre-cal, yeah.
Pre-cal?
Pre-cal.
Okay. Do you know that he invented calculus?
I wonder why I haven't heard of him. No.
Well, the story goes is that Isaac Newton, who lived in the same basic time period as him, there's this debate. If you go and do a search online, you'll see that there's a big controversy about who exactly invented calculus first. And most people say they invented it separately, like without knowledge of each other. But most people would say, well, Isaac Newton invented it first, but then Leibniz published it first by about 4 years. And I have a daughter right now that is taking pre-cal, and it's, driving her crazy. In fact, one of Sissel's roommates is her tutor coming over and helping her with calculus. So if you ever struggle with calculus, which is pretty much everybody,
Every person.
you can blame Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
I always wanted a face for that.
And I know so little about calculus. I don't even know what it is. I mean, like if you said, and I took a class on it in college. I've forgotten it so much that I couldn't even. It's like integrals but I don't.
I believe so. Yeah, it's been a long time. Honestly, I think some of those maths just kind of blend together for me. I know proofs are geometry.
Yeah, yeah.
about
so yeah, geometry is a little bit easier. It's like shapes and figures.
You're like, I got
and
that one.
Triangles. And I can do algebra. It's like a squared plus b squared equals c squared and that kind of stuff. But trigonometry, okay. But calculus, man, that brings it to a higher level. So here's, I just got this off Wikipedia. I'm just going to read this one paragraph here. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, born in 1646, died in 1716. So, he mostly a 17th and early 18th century person. A German polymath. You ever heard the name polymath? And the reason you're probably not familiar with it is that because there are very few polymaths out there anymore.
Does it mean it's someone that's like very good at all forms of math? Okay.
Well, yeah.
You're right. That's not most people.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know the name anymore because, and I don't think, and I'm willing to be corrected on this. I don't think it only has to do with math. I think it has to do with the fact that they're involved in a lot of different disciplines. But he was a mathematician, a philosopher, a scientist, a diplomat. He is credited alongside Sir Isaac Newton, as I mentioned, with the creation of calculus, in addition to many other branches of mathematics, such as binary arithmetic and statistics. He's been called the last universal genius due to his vast expertise across fields, which became a rarity after his lifetime with the coming of the Industrial Revolution and the spread of specialized labor. He's a prominent figure in the history of philosophy and in the history of mathematics. And many, many people start in math and then move to philosophy. And the reason why this switch often happens is because the mathematics has certainty to it. 2 + 2 is 4 is not something that people debate. It's an established, fact. And they get so caught up in the math that they want to bring the same kind of certainty to the human mind. And that was the exercise that Rene Descartes went after, and that's why he ended up with his cogito ergo sum, the I think therefore I am. All right, his works of philosophy, theology, ethics, politics, law, history, philology, games, and music, and other studies. He made major contributions to physics and technology and anticipated notions that surfaced much later in probability theory, biology, medicine, geology, psychology, linguistics, and computer science. All right, so he had a huge influence. I mainly want to talk about an aspect of his philosophy, and he wrote a book called Monadology.
Whoa.
Okay. Monadology. And again, he's a rationalist philosopher, and this philosophy blows me away. And what it is, and let me just read this little paragraph here, and then you tell me if it makes sense or is this just kind of like wacko world. He said, a monad means that which is one has no parts and is therefore indivisible. These are the fundamental existing things according to Leibniz. His theory of monads is meant to be a superior alternative to the theory of atoms that was becoming popular in natural philosophy at this time. If you think back, before Socrates, there was a pre-Socratic philosopher by the name of Democritus, right? I've heard it pronounced different ways, so let's just say Democritus. And he came up with the first atomic theory, that everything in the world is made up of unsplittable atoms, which to some degree he was right. You know, I mean, I'm not great with this kind of stuff, but Cecil, you're probably smarter than I am at this. But if you take something like our glass that I've used as an example, this would be made up of a whole bunch of tiny, tiny little atoms, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah, very, very tiny.
Okay, tiny. And then I guess Albert Einstein or some of those guys realized that you can't actually split them atoms. So an atom, by definition, is something that is the smallest possible thing. But then they went and split the smallest possible thing. And so, but but anyway, so what Leibniz did was he said, rather than an atomic theory, he kind of brought it to a metaphysical level where everything is made up of these invisible, individual, and unrelatable monads that make up all things. And it's really, really kind of weird because he said that these things have no relationship with each other, but it's only through God ordering every single one of them and the relationship with each other that is creating the world that we have. So what he's basically done is he's broken down the world into little itsy-bitsy tiny metaphysical things that are called monads. And they don't even relate to each other, but it's all God kind of moving all the little monads around at the same time, and God's totally in control. And he's also famous for saying that this is the best of all possible worlds. And he's been criticized for that. Like Voltaire wrote a book called Candide, where he panned Leibniz for saying this is the best possible world, because back in the time of Voltaire, there was this great earthquake that killed, hundreds of thousands of people. And so Voltaire was thinking, if this is the best possible world, then how can something like that happen? And of course, that plays into the whole argument about, how could a good God allow so much evil to happen?
Right,
so
right.
It kind of plays into all of that. But, anyways, the monads, all right, I find them fascinating. And he also says that every single little monad has within itself the whole history of the world. I mean, every single little tiny one. And again, it's kind of weird, but it's part of an atomic theory that has some basis of truth to it. Okay. So, but clearly it's almost the exact opposite of somebody like Baruch Spinoza, because Spinoza said the entire world is one substance. And Leibniz is taking the opposite thing and saying, no, every single little particle, every little atom is its own substance. And so he didn't say it was an infinite amount, but he said almost infinite number of these little substances called monads. And that's what the world is, and God is controlling every single one of them. And the only truth to it, which would be similar to something like Thomistic philosophy, is that God is holding the world in existence at every moment. If God stopped to think of us, if God stopped to will the existence of anything, well, then it would vanish and it would no longer exist, right? So in that regard, he's kind of onto something, but he's brought it down to a very atomic level. So that's Gottfried Leibniz. But there's more. I want to tell you about two more contributions of Leibniz that really had a pretty big impact on future philosophy, including Albert Einstein. But let's see, is there anything else So I see
Yeah, there's
Lisa
some
has
comments.
jumped on. Yeah, go
definitely.
ahead.
I'll just update everyone. First off, Keith says that's a big word. I can't remember.
Monadology.
Monadology.
Yeah,
Yep,
that was his
one.
book. Yeah.
That is quite mouthy. And Timoteo pointed out that it was a mathematician that discovered the musical score that's on the tilma. You've heard of that, right? Of course, Dave.
Remember we played it.
Yeah, we have played it before.
It
is awesome. So he was just pointing out that that was a mathematician that found that. And then honestly, Lisa is way over my head with the sciencey lingo, and so I don't think I can comment much on
you and me both,
hers,
Lisa.
But thank you, Lisa, for being here. We're glad that you're with us.
All right, so above her head, and me too. I find it interesting. So, okay, hang with us, Lisa, because I know you've commented in the past. I'd love to know what you think about this. But now here's the next thing, and this is where I find it amazing that I'm pretty certain that I got through 12 years of grade school and high school without ever hearing the name Gottfried Leibniz, right? But he is considered to have influenced Albert Einstein, particularly through his ideas on the relational nature of space and time, which prefigured some aspects of Einstein's theory of relativity, including the concept that motion is only meaningful relative to other objects, not in an absolute sense. And this is sometimes referred to as Leibniz's principle of the identity of indiscernibles. Okay, I'm sorry. Big words. Lisa's probably not even with us any longer. But anyways, Leibniz also, I mentioned this before, that probably the most influential philosopher of the last 300 years is a guy named Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant came up with what he called himself the Copernican revolution in philosophy, right? Where rather than our minds conforming to the world, where I see a tree and my mind abstracts the treeness, the form of it, and my mind in my intellect becomes what it sees, right? So I'm conforming myself to the exterior world, and remember, in by doing so, I'm coming to know something about God. What Kant did was he reversed that, and he said instead it's the world that's conforming to the mind. And I, according to Kant, have these categories within me that apply to the world, inform the world about me, right? And he also said there's no such thing as he was a nominalist. There's no such thing as universals, and even if there are, we can't know them, right? So he was skeptical about the universals, but it's a total switch. But I think it would be ridiculous to not think, and I think it's an absolute fact, that Kant was influenced by Leibniz. Okay, so when Leibniz started talking about the relativity of space and time, because Kant said time and space are something that we impose upon the world. It comes from us. Space and time are not out there to be discovered. It comes from us. Every single person, through their categories, is able to impose space and time on their experience. Okay, I know that's kind of deep and it's kind of weird, but the last thing that I think Leibniz had a big influence on is ideas about language and the relationship between language and philosophy. And if you look at the last probably 100 years of philosophy, people like Bertrand Russell and Ludwig Wittgenstein and people like that, people have been obsessed with language, linguistic philosophy. What do words mean? What is the significance of words? And, Wittgenstein, for example, wanted to have a universal language where every word only meant it didn't mean more than one thing, right? And so that there was something that was absolute about language. Well, Leibniz was onto this hundreds of years before Wittgenstein. So this is one of the other things he did. The guy was really, really smart. Let's just say that. And he had a huge contribution, in all these different areas that I'm talking about. But I think, as I kind of start to wrap this up a little bit, when you look at the the rationalists like, Descartes and Spinoza and Leibniz, and then the reaction to the rationalists who put so much emphasis on reason, the reaction were the empiricists who were Locke and Berkeley and Hume, and they put so much emphasis on experience. Locke said we're tabula rasa, we're just a blank slate, and everything we know comes through experience. And so you have these two sides that are kind of duking it out. But somebody like Aristotle and Aquinas would have said it's both and. Okay, our senses and our reason are working together. You don't have to choose a side. You don't have to be a rationalist. You don't have to be an empiricist. You can be both. And that's why people like Aristotle are sometimes called soft empiricists and not hard ones like these other guys. So this all kind of goes back to what I said at the very beginning of the show: is why is St. Thomas Aquinas the great philosopher and the patron saint of all Catholic school education? Because he synthesized everything. Dr. Peter Crave says Thomas Aquinas is the philosopher that it makes sense. It's not like wacky stuff, like George Berkeley saying there's no matter. He denies the very existence of matter. David Hume denied the very existence of the self. Like there's no such thing as a self. Because why? Because we can't sense it. If Cecil has an idea, like a sense of like the Cecil Andersonness, but you can't see that. You can't. So Hume says it doesn't exist, right? And so, anyways, a lot of these philosophers are pretty wacky, but Aquinas made a lot of sense. He was a philosopher of common sense, and that's. Boy, it's almost 2:00. I've done a lot of talking today, haven't I? Why don't we just see if there's any comments?
I'll add a couple
I know
of
some people have commented, and
Yep.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Timoteo says that we're going over our heads about Mach 5, but that's okay. We're trying our best to keep up, Dave. And Lisa said, thinking and beingness arise simultaneously. All actions react with all other action. We both influence and are influences by the full body of life. Are you following that?
Okay, wait, let me, okay.
Do you want me to read it again?
No, I can see it here.
Perfect.
Can I read it?
Yeah, go for
I
it.
can, okay. Thinking and beingness arise simultaneously. See, now, all action reacts with all other action. We both influence and are influenced by the full body of life. Lisa, where did that come from? I thought you were the one that thought this was too deep. That's like a really deep thought. That's pretty amazing. So now, thinking and beingness, I arise from simultaneously. I don't know. I'm created and I exist, and then I start thinking. Okay, so like at the same time, a newborn baby exists, they start thinking, right? So I guess in that regard, that could be true.
She also wants to know if you were to recommend one book to read this week, what would it be?
Does it have to be read in 1 week?
Well, no, just maybe starting it this 1 week. There's very few books that you can do in a week.
I almost always, because I'm asked this question all the time when I go and give talks, and I would go get The Dumb Ox by G.K. Chesterton, which is a really, I don't even think it's that big, maybe 150 pages or so, but it's an introduction to St. Thomas Aquinas and his thought, and it's really, really good. And if that's not your jam, I would go get maybe one of Plato's dialogues. Maybe the Republic's pretty long, but
yeah,
like Phaedo or the Symposium is really a good one. And I haven't read a lot of these yet. I'm still kind of catching up on all this, and because I read about philosophers rather than reading philosophers. But I'll spend the rest of my life kind of catching up and actually reading the primary texts. Right now, I'm mostly reading the history of philosophy. And so those would be a couple recommendations. Lisa, why don't you come back next week and tell us what you read? And if you remember last week, we were talking about having kind of like a little reading club,
We did talk about
where, there's aren't a lot of books that you can read the whole thing in a week, but you could certainly read a lot of Plato's dialogues. In fact, I'd be curious, the people who are here right now, whether or not you would be interested in something like that, being assigned like the symposium or something like that. And I also, you're thinking like, well, what does this have to do with Thomas Aquinas? Well, Thomas Aquinas is all, his whole philosophy, his whole Summa kind of converges upon Jesus Christ. In fact, you've got to get about 3/4 into the Summa before he even introduces you to the incarnation. I mean, it's deep into the Summa, because it all builds up to that, because you're not going to understand Jesus until you understand God and understand human nature and understand the virtues and all the things that go into what could be and is the perfect person, Jesus Christ, right? So that, that's a thought. We could maybe read a book. But anyways,
yeah,
anything
Lisa's
else?
like the dumb ox. LOL, I'll check it out. Yep, that was a nickname of Aquinas. That's where that comes from. It's not just a randomly called the dumb ox, which is quite the name. And G.K. Chesterton, I've not read that particular book, but I have read other G.K. Chesterton. I always find him a very entertaining read.
Yeah, I know. I have a friend of mine who has a PhD in theology, and he used to be a professor at some pretty big Catholic colleges. And he found Chesterton to be above it. Like, just he didn't quite get him. But there's other people that really like him a lot. And by the way, Dale Ahlquist is going to come into studio on Monday. Did I put that in the calendar?
You did put that on there. Wait, what time on Monday again? It was early in the morning, wasn't it?
It was like 9 or so. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine. No, my brain was just like, when on Monday? I knew this.
Yeah, I think it's Monday. So that'd be so cool to have him on a show like this.
It would be
Dale
great.
Ahlquist, Chesterton.
Pre-record Back to the Father.
Chesterton was a Thomist, and But anyways, that pretty much brings us to an end to the program. I really appreciate the comments and the interaction. And if you are not yet on our mailing list, please email us backtothefather@grnonline.com, backtothefather@grnonline.com. And or if you know somebody that you think ought to be on the mailing list and they agree to it, then to ask them to contact us as well, and we'd be happy to put them on the mailing list. All right. Any closing thoughts, Sissel? Now that your head is totally mush.
Totally mush from the day. Dave likes to pump us up on our Friday afternoons when we're mentally checking out.
Yeah. We talked about like going to like a cafe and
honestly,
what a great contrast to be like, sitting around and maybe having a drink and chilling. And,
I would need an old fashioned, I think.
And then like people come and you talk about deep stuff and all that.
It'd be like, it was really popular. Was it Steven Crowder did the sitting and like change my mind on something?
Oh yeah.
You just sit there, but I think you need to do it very like not like something crazy, but just literally like let's talk about this philosopher or something, and just sit down with your cup of tea or your your drink and join them.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
Make it chill.
That'd be fun.
Let's have good conversations again.
Yeah, they make conversations great again.
Make conversations.
There you go.
All right. Well, on that note.
On that note, all right. Thanks, everybody. God willing, we'll see you next Friday. I always have to look at Sissel and say, "Are we on next Friday?" I think we are.
Yeah, I believe we should be.
Yeah. They haven't kicked us off yet. Nobody said, "Hey, you're you're done." Okay, but sometimes like when we have share-a-thons and things like that, we can't do the show. But anyways,
for whatever reason, our outro is not playing. So just imagine some music, guys.
And a limping dog. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. God bless you. And we'll see you for the next Back to the Father next Friday, same time. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.